Chapter 5878. She was already very familiar with this feeling. Since she tried to break through, this situation often happened. She was close to breaking through countless times, but she was suppressed by this seal countless times. Although she never talked about it, the feeling of being suppressed was really uncomfortable. It was like she was very close to the truth, but there was a layer of fog in front of her. Even if she tried her best to see all this clearly, she just couldn't do it. She knew in her heart that the former master must have set this seal for her to protect her. But now, she really wanted to know all this. She came to the upper realm from the immortal region. But what happened in the upper realm? Why did the former master and the others fall? She wanted to know all this. At least, she wanted to know who her enemy was and what she could do. A strong unwillingness spread in Ling Er's heart. She was unwilling to live like this all the time. Now was the best opportunity to break through the seal. If she still couldn't break through the seal in such an environment, then she really didn't know when she could succeed in the future. At this moment, everyone suddenly found that there was a terrifying attraction in Ling Er's body. The cyclone, which was already very large, became even larger at this moment. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. They didn't know what happened to Ling suddenly. This situation didn't last long. Just when the cyclone became terrifying and the white light power seemed to surround Ling Er, a sound suddenly sounded. Boom! A huge sound erupted with Ling Er as the center. The sudden sound attracted everyone's attention. Even Bailey Hongzhuang and others who were cultivating couldn't help but open their eyes. In their sight, Ling Er, who had her eyes closed, frowned. Beads of sweat flowed down from her forehead. Her body trembled slightly, as if she was suffering great pain. Second cousin-in-law, what's wrong with Ling Er? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang exiting from the cultivation state. Could it be that something went wrong during his cultivation and he went berserk? Don't worry, Ling Er is trying to break through. Bailey Hongzhuang gestured to reassure Lin Yi, but she couldn't help but worry. I don't know if Ling Er can break through the seal this time. This is such a good opportunity. Maybe even God wants to help her remember everything. Bailey Hongzhuang's dark phoenix eyes were full of concern and worry. Her eyes were always locked on Ling. She also hoped that Ling Er could break through the shackles. Even if Ling Er never mentioned it, she understood how uncomfortable it was to be close at hand. Moreover, now that everyone had broken through to the Radiant Moon realm, it would be too cruel for Ling Er to remain in the Nebula realm forever. Ling Er will break through. A warm and magnetic voice sounded in Bailey Hongzhuang's ears. She turned her eyes and met Bewitching's reassuring eyes. Don't worry, Ling Er is a dragon. Her cultivation talent is extremely high. In addition, the seal has been around for so many years. It's impossible for it to shackle her forever. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Her clear eyes were tinged with hope. I hope so. Bali Yin Che didn't speak. He just looked at Ling silently with a complicated gaze. Chapter 5879. Bang! Crack! The cracking sound was like the sound of nature to everyone's ears. Then, they realized that Ling Er's aura had finally increased. The Radiant Moon Realm. Her cultivation had broken through to the Radiant Moon Realm as expected. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they noticed this. Smiles of joy appeared on their faces. She's finally broken through. Bailey Hongzhuang could not hide the joy on her face. After such a long time, Ling Er has finally broken through. You can relax now. Bewitching's lips curled into a smile. His handsome face brightened when he saw the woman's beautiful smile next to him. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. Ling Er should be happy now. For a long time, other than Ling Er's cold personality, there was also a reason for the seal. After all, a person who did not even know what had happened to her in the past would never be truly happy. Bewitching held Bailey Hongzhuang's fair and tender hand as a complicated look appeared in his handsome eyes. It's hard to say. Master and Mistress had sealed Ling Er's memories back then because she could not bear the pain of what had happened back then. However, what you've said makes sense as well. She can only truly be happy when she faces her past. Perhaps what had happened back then was too much for her to bear, but as long as she accepts it and lets it all go, she'll be able to open her heart. This process may be a little long, but it's all right. We'll be by her side. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Even if the road ahead was full of thorns, as long as they were united, there was nothing to be afraid of. After Ling Er had broken through to the radiant moon realm, even those who did not know the reason were happy for her. Many cultivators had broken through to the radiant moon realm now. It would be inappropriate if a genius like Ling Er did not break through. However, the breakthrough did not end there. Boom, 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 boom. Almost immediately after she had broken through, a few more sounds were heard. Second level, radiant moon realm. Third level, radiant moon realm. Fourth order, radiant moon. Fifth order, radiant moon. In just a short period of time, Ling Er's cultivation had broken through at an astonishing speed. Looking at this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. Compared to the breakthroughs of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Ling Er's breakthroughs were even more terrifying. Is this really a breakthrough? How could he break through so many levels in one go? Could this be the legendary suppression of desire? I've never seen anyone improve at such a terrifying speed. They recalled how they had been pitying Ling Er for not being able to break through to the radiant moon realm after such a long time. But what happened next gave them a solid slap in the face. What do you mean by not breaking through? I'm afraid you won't be able to withstand my breakthrough. Jiang Wenyan and Murong Jing looked at each other. At this moment, they didn't want to speak anymore. Could it be any more exaggerated? Since the appearance of the heavenly phenomenon, everything that had happened had completely exceeded their ability to bear. It was simply terrifying. No wonder Beichin and the others caught up to us so quickly, even though their cultivation was much lower than ours. So this is how they break through. Murong Jing turned to look at Di Xiaofeng. He still remembered that Di Xiaofeng had once been worried about this problem. Now, it seemed that his worries were unnecessary. Chapter 5880. There was a faint smile on Bai Li Yin Che's evil face. Then he closed his eyes again and began to cultivate. The knot in his heart was finally untied. Everyone began to cultivate. Only Ling was immersed in her memory after the breakthrough. When her dusty memories were unlocked, she suddenly understood everything that she had been unable to understand in the past. She had never understood why her memories had to be sealed. Even though she had failed to protect her master's life at the very last moment, it was still something she should bear. It was just that when she really came into contact with the cruel truth, she understood why such a seal was set up. In an instant, tears streamed down her face. The painful memory of the past was exposed in front of her without any concealment. Recalling Bai Yunjiao's loving eyes for her, her heart was deeply hurt. That was the pain and regret that went deep in her bone marrow. Previously, she couldn't remember everything. When she saw Bai Yunjiao in the ruin, she didn't feel this guilt at all. Thinking back at this moment, she was really remorseful and painful to the extreme. She actually made such a mistake. Lin Yi and others saw Ling Er's tearful face, and they suddenly looked at each other. They didn't understand what happened. Ling Er was usually arrogant and indifferent. She rarely showed any kind of emotion. However, now she showed such a painful look. What's wrong with Ling? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask. A breakthrough was a happy thing. Why did Ling Er behave so strangely? Ling Er's cold face once again showed the kind of heartfelt color that went deep in her bone marrow. Her dark pupils were full of sorrow. She raised her hands to cover her face, and tears overflowed from her fingers. She was so wrong. Something must have happened. I have never seen Ling Er in such pain. Lin Xianqian's face was also a little more serious. With Ling Er's temperament, it was definitely something that could make her show such an expression. Lin Yi nodded slightly and immediately trotted to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, second cousin-in-law. Something seems to have happened to Ling Er? Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang opened her eyes and immediately noticed Ling Er's appearance, who was burying her head in tears. It was a silent cry, but it was full of sorrow and pain. There was a touch of pity in her dark phoenix eyes, but she was not surprised by such a situation. She understood that her master was such a good person. She must have her reasons for sealing Ling Er's memory. Now it seemed that it was because she didn't want to see Ling Er in such pain, so she set up such a seal. What happened at that time? She originally thought that she already had some understanding of the situation back then, but now it seemed that what she knew was only a part of it. Her delicate, pretty face showed hesitation. She wanted to ask Ling Er what happened at that time, but she didn't go in the end. Ling had just understood everything. Now, she couldn't get out of this emotion. It was difficult for her to ask now. It was better to give her some time to calm down. The pain of having to be sealed must be difficult to accept. Don't worry. Ling Er just remembered some things at that time. What we can do now is to accompany her. She will be fine after she clears up her emotions. Chapter 5881. Time was the best medicine. No matter how cruel the reality was, one would feel better with the passage of time. Although she was also curious about what had happened, that even Ling Er cried bitterly about it, she would wait until the day when Ling Er was willing to tell her. Bali Yin-che had opened his eyes at some point. Looking at Ling Er, who was in pain, a trace of pity flashed across his deep blue and black eyes. This woman was usually so aloof, but now she showed such an expression. What had happened back then must have been very serious and hurt her deeply. Bai Yin-che and Bailey Hongzhuang had the same idea. It was better not to disturb Ling Er at this time. Naturally, it would take some time to digest the memories that had been covered in dust for many years. Fortunately, Ling Er pulled herself together again after being sad for a while. Strong determination appeared in her eyes. She was too powerless in the face of everything back then, but now she could not let such a thing happen again. She had to make herself stronger. Only in this way could everything be changed. Bailey Hongzhuang also paid attention to Ling Er's situation when she was cultivating. After noticing that Ling Er had pulled herself together, she was relieved. This result was exactly what she had hoped for, and Ling Er's ability to adjust did not disappoint them. Everyone once again entered the state of cultivation with peace of mind. They only hoped that such a cultivation paradise could stay like this forever. If they had been in such an environment after entering the ancient battlefield, they would not be in the Radiant Moon Realm now. Di Xiaofeng and the others just sat there and watched Bailey Hongzhuang and the others cultivate with envy in their eyes. Xiaofeng, I think we can be at ease now. Qing Devil is neither dark nor light attribute. His cultivation should not be as good as Beichen's. Lin Taxing was in high spirits. They were so worried about the previous situation, but now they finally had a chance to take a breather. Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly. I think we need to find Qing Devil as soon as possible and kill him before he becomes too strong. After all, he was an expert. In addition, Jun Lingxuan's cultivation talent was not weak. In time, his strength would improve very quickly. If we can get rid of him as soon as possible, we'll have one less problem to worry about. What goes around comes around. It's only been a short while, and the situation has already changed. Di Xiaofeng chuckled. This really made people heave a sigh of relief. This situation lasted for 3 whole days. During these 3 days, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others all broke through to level 7 Radiant Moon. Such a harvest made one blush with shame. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only opened their eyes when the sky returned to its original state and the energy of various attributes filled the air. Previously, everyone had always felt that the harvest in the ancient battlefield was much smaller than they thought. However, it was worth it for the sake of the improvement at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang stretched and twisted her body flexibly. With the improvement of her cultivation, she felt that her whole spirit had become better. Let's go over there and have a look. Bailey Hongzhuang pointed to the distance. She noticed that after the confrontation between the 2 attributes disappeared, the distance was still full of fluctuations of the 2 attributes. Perhaps that was the place where the vision of heaven and earth appeared. Everyone naturally noticed this, and after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's proposal, they all nodded their heads. Chapter 5882. Let's go and take a look. Di Bei Chun stood up, his eyes solemn as he looked ahead. Vaguely, he felt that there seemed to be something extraordinary in front of him. Everyone set off together. The huge group moved together with great momentum. Di Bei Chun, your cultivation has surpassed everyone in such a short time. Di Xiaofeng walked beside Di Bei Chun with a faint smile on his handsome face. He patted the latter's shoulder. When we go back, Father will definitely be proud of you. Big brother, what do you mean? Di Bei Chun raised his eyebrows. Your harvest this time is not smaller than mine. The nine-tailed inferno fox, this kind of demon beast, was undoubtedly a strong existence. If Di Xiaofeng could think of a way to subdue the nine-tailed inferno fox, then in the upper realm, ordinary people would not dare to have any ideas about him. Previously, Grandfather told me that now that you have returned to the Di family, I should probably go to the Lin family. Di Xiaofeng sighed. His originally somewhat heavy expression became relaxed. Fortunately, you're back. Before, I was still thinking about whether to stay in the Di family or go to the Lin family. Now, I don't have to worry about this problem anymore. Hearing this, Di Bei Chun finally understood. Even if you go to the Lin family, it's fine. Anyway, there's a teleportation array. It's very convenient for the two families to come and go. Moreover, even if you become the head of the Lin family, you're still a member of the Di family. Di Bei Chun did not care about this at all. He was very glad that he had a brother like Xiaofeng. As for the position of the head of the family, the two brothers did not care. The most important thing was that they were a family. That's natural. Di Xiaofeng raised his eyebrows and smiled warmly. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at the two brothers chatting happily. Their emotions could not help but be affected by it, and smiles appeared on their faces. Xiren and Yingying have obtained the inheritance for a while now. I wonder if they've come out yet? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. She was used to moving together and was not used to not having the two of them by her side. Counting carefully, it has been a few months since the two of them obtained the inheritance. If the inheritance was not too difficult to obtain, they should have already obtained it. I don't know about that, but if they come out, I believe that after seeing the heaven and earth anomaly, they will definitely rush there. Di Bei Chun looked at the distant sky. Xiren and Yingying. Now it seemed that they had made the right decision to come here. Perhaps it was because everyone wanted to meet up with Xiren and Yingying as soon as possible, so everyone sped up. They just wanted to reach their destination as soon as possible. After rushing for a few days, they were getting closer and closer to their destination. However, the closer they got, the more they felt an invisible pressure enveloping them. It was as if a kind of fear and worship came from the bottom of their hearts, causing their hearts to tremble. What's going on? Chapter 5883. The closer I get, the more I feel a great pressure. Even standing up straight has become very difficult. Jiang Wenyan stared in front of him in shock. He did not know what was in front of him, but this feeling made him feel fearful from the bottom of his heart. What kind of terrifying thing could actually make him so nervous and tremble? I feel the same way. It's as if there's an invisible mountain that makes us unconsciously and devoutly worship it. Morong Jing nodded. This was an unprecedented feeling, but he could not understand what kind of power could cause them to fall into such a state. Bailey Hongzhuang stared deeply into the distance. She vaguely understood that it was not that everyone was unable to stand up straight. Instead, it was that great power that made everyone want to worship it. Hence, they had subconsciously felt that they could not stand up straight. Unless they could break their desire to worship, they would never be able to stand up straight. However, even though she understood this, she could not give up on her desire to worship. It was too terrifying. Just how great was that power? Is it a god? Di Bei Chun's gaze was deep as he stared at the light and darkness in the distance. The word God appeared in his mind. Aside from a god, what else could make them feel this way? Once Di Bei Chun had spoken, the crowd was shocked. They looked at each other and felt that what Di Bei Chun had said made a lot of sense. Perhaps this was the power of a god. Only a god could make people uncontrollably want to worship it. Is it really a god? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Bei Chun. She remembered that she had asked Granny Hua this question. Granny Hua had said that the people of the immortal realm were not immortals. It was only because their powers had reached a level that ordinary people could not reach that they were regarded as immortals in the eyes of ordinary people. She had carefully interpreted the meaning of this statement and understood that the people of the immortal realm were not immortals. They were simply cultivators with even greater powers. She did not know if one's cultivation would cause people to feel a sense of worship when they reached the pinnacle of power. What she wanted to know was what kind of terrifying existence had appeared in this ancient battlefield. If the other party was alive, it would only take a single thought to kill them all. For a moment, she even hesitated. Should they continue forward or not? Everyone's footsteps unconsciously slowed down. It was as if the closer they were to the front, the more difficult it would be to take each step. However, even so, everyone wanted to take a look at the front to see the world they had never come into contact with. After moving forward for a short distance, they heard a commotion in front of them. Just from a noisy discussion, everyone understood that many teams had already arrived here. "Someone has arrived before us," Chun Feng said slowly. His heavy heart was somewhat relieved now as well. As the crowd climbed up the hill, everything in front of them suddenly became clear. And Chapter 5884. After feeling the rich light, everyone felt their bodies become relaxed. This feeling was better than the collective chanting of the Holy Light Assembly's cultivators. Rich and pure light energy entered their bodies, dispelling all their exhaustion. Even some cultivators with hidden ailments began to be healed under such circumstances. Looking at this majestic sculpture, everyone found the origin of their inner devout worship. They were devoutly worshiping this sculpture, just like the sculpture of God. "Oh my God, there is such a sculpture." Lenny couldn't help but sigh. What kind of person can build such a sculpture? She couldn't imagine that this was not something a human could create. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at this scene, and her heart was also full of shock. She couldn't imagine such a powerful force. If this was created by the people of the immortal domain, then the strength of the cultivators of the immortal domain might have exceeded their imagination. Bai Li Yin Che and others just looked at this scene in amazement, and their hearts were full of emotions. Only Huang Futing and a group of dark attribute cultivators frowned slightly under the light attribute. Darkness and light were on opposite sides, after all. This extremely comfortable environment for everyone seemed a bit depressing for them. The rich light power seemed to dispel the darkness in their bodies, and they were in a state of oppression. However, when everyone turned to the other side, they found that in a far distance, there was also a black statue that stood proudly, looking down on the crowd. The rich dark power rippled like ink. When everyone looked up, they could clearly feel that it was a lifelike statue, but with their strength, they couldn't look at the statue at all. The two statues, one black and one white, confronted each other like gods and demons. Shocking power spread from the two statues. The closer one was to the middle of the two statues, the more one could feel the strong, murderous aura. It was so oppressive that it seemed to be able to crush everything. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at these two statues in a daze. She couldn't help but think of her master and master's grandmaster. There was no such requirement in the upper realm, but obviously, the contradiction between the dark and light attributes was inevitably magnified in the immortal domain. The ancient battlefield originated from the immortal domain, and these two statues existed here. Her master and grandmaster's strength were already super strong in her eyes, but under such pressure, they still couldn't resist. A desolate feeling spread in her heart, and she couldn't help but clench Di Beichen's hand. She would not allow anyone to take away her happiness. Di Beichen could also sense the anxiety in Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. He immediately pulled her into his arms, and his strong embrace brought her endless warmth. "Wife, I will always be by your side." Bailey Hongzhuang looked up and coincidentally met his deep eyes that were filled with deep affection. Her gaze was filled with determination, and no one could separate them. Linger looked at the scene in front of her and felt even more touched. She had personally experienced everything that had happened back then, and all of this had stirred up the memories in her heart. Her hands gradually clenched together, and pain and complexity appeared on her frosty face, as well as a trace of fragility and sadness. After Bailey Hongzhuang came back to her senses, she also noticed that the attribute energy here was extremely rich. Cultivating here would also yield twice the result with half the effort. She had to pull herself together. Chapter 5885. Let's go to the front, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly, her beautiful eyes fixed on a figure in front of her. Xiao So. They met again. Di Beichen and the others also noticed the Xiao family's team. In fact, it was not strange to see Xiao So here. After all, as a light attribute cultivator, Xiao So must have gained a lot in the previous changes of heaven and earth. Sensing the abnormality here, she would definitely come to take a look as soon as possible. She would not miss this opportunity. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the others approached, Xiao So's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. Now she really hated Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. She didn't understand whether they were destined to be enemies in her previous life or something else. Why was it that every time she had a plan, it would be ruined by them? She did not care about what happened in the past. After meeting the Malakian fiend, she felt that the past was not that important anymore. As long as she could be with the Qing devil, she didn't care about anything else. Unfortunately, Di Xiaofeng ruined everything. What she was most worried about was that everyone would know the true identity of the Qing devil. In this way, it would be very difficult for her to be with the Qing devil. She had tried her best to hide all of this, but she didn't expect that she would still be exposed in the end. After being separated for so long, she hadn't seen the Qing devil and didn't know how the Qing devil was doing now. As they got closer and closer to the Statue of Light, the faces of Huang Futing and the others became more and more unsightly. After noticing this, Di Beichun immediately said, "The environment here is not suitable for you. I think you'd better go over there. The dark power there is very strong, which is very suitable for your cultivation." Hearing Di Beichun's words, Huang Futing and the others looked at each other and then nodded. They did feel very depressed here. On the contrary, going to the Statue of Darkness was their paradise. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to be with Di Beichen and the others, they wouldn't have approached the Statue of Light at all. "Then we'll head over first," Huang Futing said. Now that things had progressed to this point, they didn't mind exposing their dark attribute identities. Here, their strength was increasing rapidly. Even when they were out of the ancient battlefield, their cultivation could still surpass many cultivators. Then they would not have to live in fear and trepidation. What's more, the situation this time made many people understand the strength of the darkness attribute. As long as they became stronger, no matter what attribute they had, it would not affect them at all. Right when Huang Futing's group left, Xiao Sou's sarcastic remarks resounded. "Di Beichun, why are you still worried about others? Why don't you ask them to leave? You yourself are of the dark attribute. Can you stand it if you stay here?" Now, cultivators from many forces had gathered here. After hearing Xiao Sou's words, they all turned to look at Di Beichen. There were dark attribute cultivators in many forces, but none of them were as ostentatious as Di Beichen. He was even the young master of the Di family. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows, and his chiseled face was covered with ice. An invisible pressure swept out, and his eyes were like knives shooting straight at Xiao So. "Are you tired of living?" Chapter 5886. After Xiao So heard this, she wanted to immediately mock back, but when she looked at Di Beichen's deep eyes, her heart inexplicably panicked, and even the words she was about to say were choked in her throat. She didn't know how much Di Beichen's cultivation had improved during this period of time, but just based on his aura, she felt that she was no match for him. In the past, when Jun Lingxuan was here, there was still a glimmer of hope if the two of them joined forces. Now, she was the only one who had to face Di Beichen and his huge team alone. If she were to get into trouble again, she might really lose her life. Thinking of this, Xiao Shou took a few steps back and gave up her original plan. Noticing Xiao Shou's retreat, everyone's expression changed slightly. It seemed that after Jun Lingxuan's death, the situation had indeed changed a lot. The cultivators of the Xiao family looked at Bewitching and his team with fear, and they couldn't help but feel annoyed. Back then, Bewitching and his team only had the Lin family as their helpers, but now, for some reason, there were so many teams around them. On the other hand, the Nangong family and the Chu family were no longer on the same side as them. It was almost impossible for them to fight against Bewitching and his team. After the cultivators of the other forces noticed this scene, there was a tacit understanding in their hearts. Now that the D family was unstoppable, anyone who got into trouble would be in trouble. Although the Xiao family is indeed no match for the D family now, what Xiao Shou said makes sense. Bewitching is a dark attribute cultivator. Logically speaking, he should feel very uncomfortable here. That's right. Didn't those dark attribute cultivators who had been hiding reveal their identities because of this? Let's wait and see. Maybe Bewitching is stronger than them and can last longer. However, the closer he is to the light god statue, the greater the pressure will be. In the end, he won't be able to stand it anymore. The tallest tree in the forest is the first to be destroyed by the wind. This was because Bewitching was in the limelight, so everyone wanted to see him make a fool of himself. A cultivator who had only ascended to the upper realm a few years ago from the lower realm had overshadowed everyone's limelight in such a short period of time. No prodigy would be willing to endure such a feeling. Bewitching noticed everyone's gaze and knew what they were thinking. His handsome face was as calm as the wind, without the slightest bit of nervousness or worry. His footsteps became firmer and firmer as he continued to move forward without stopping. Bewitching, they seem to be waiting to see you make a fool of yourself. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. It's a pity that they won't be able to see it. Bewitching played with Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand with a playful smile on his lips. I also think that their expressions will be very interesting later. If Chun Feng and the others hadn't seen Bewitching's cultivation before, they would have been worried. However, after witnessing the scene before them, their worries disappeared. Even if all this didn't conform to common sense, it was only natural for Bewitching to do so. As they got closer to the light god statue, everyone felt more and more comfortable. All the impurities in their bodies seemed to have been purified, and they felt indescribably comfortable. Chapter 5887. As they got closer to the light god statue, everyone felt their bodies becoming more and more ethereal. It was as if they were floating in the air and could fly at any time. The light energy in Bailey Hongzhuang's body seemed to resonate. She raised her head and looked at the statue. Even though she could not see the statue's face clearly, she still felt that she had a deeper understanding of the light energy. This feeling, Bailey Hongzhuang pondered. It's just like the light sacred monument. When one was comprehending the light sacred monument, they would have the same realization. However, the aura of the light god statue in front of them was stronger than the light sacred monument. Perhaps the light sacred monument was the same as this statue. It was just that the names were different and the power was different. Bewitching nodded slightly. This feeling is indeed very similar. I never thought that there would be such a peculiar statue. It's really an eye-opener. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. She did not know what the statue was for, but she knew that staying here would be very beneficial to their improvement. Thinking of this, she could not help but turn her gaze to the darkness in the distance. Presumably, their understanding of the darkness attribute would become more thorough there. Ling, do you know where this place is? Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Ling Since the seal on Ling memory had been broken, she should have remembered everything that had happened in the immortal region. She did not want to touch on Ling painful past. However, they had to understand the situation at hand. Why were these two statues of gods and demons located here? Ling looked at everything in front of her and shook her head blankly. She frowned and said, I've never been to this place." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Could it be that their judgment was wrong and the ancient battlefield did not originate from the immortal region? However, I can sense a very terrifying aura from these two statues. The place where the light sacred maiden used to live also had an extremely powerful light god statue. The sacred maiden had always lived near the light god statue. It was their belief. Similarly, light attribute cultivators can also obtain power from the light god statue. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang understood. Although all of this did not help the situation at hand, since they were both statues, there must be some connection between the two. Such a terrifying existence was not something that the upper realm could possess. At the same time, Di Xiaofeng tried to communicate with the nine-tailed inferno fox. Currently, there were only two people who understood the ancient battlefield. One was the Qing devil, and the other was the nine-tailed inferno fox. The azure demon had yet to appear so far. He was probably afraid of their existence. Moreover, even if he was really here, he would not tell them this information. Therefore, the nine-tailed inferno. Although the pressure that the nine-tailed inferno fox gave him was not small, he felt that the nine-tailed inferno fox did not have any malicious intent towards him. It was just that it was used to being strong and was too lazy to care about small fries like them. Nine-tailed inferno fox, do you know what these two statues are for? Di Xiaofeng probed. Your luck is pretty good. You actually happened to see the appearance of these two divine statues. The nine-tailed inferno fox's voice was filled with laziness, but it also contained a bit of surprise. Chapter 5888. The two statues have always been here, but they don't appear often. Then what is the meaning of their appearance? Di Xiaofeng looked at the two statues. They looked really extraordinary. There must be a reason for them to stay here. The nine-tailed inferno fox paused and said, I don't know. These things have been here for much longer than me. However, as you can feel now, staying here is very helpful for your cultivation. Simply put, this is the baptism of a god, and that is the baptism of a devil. No matter what kind of baptism it is very beneficial for cultivators. After the baptism, your cultivation talent will increase, and the hidden injuries caused by cultivation over the years will disappear. You just happen to come across this opportunity, so you should seize this opportunity to improve yourself. This cultivation is really too weak. At the end, the nine-tailed inferno fox's face was filled with disdain. Hearing this, Di Xiaofeng felt a little helpless. Ever since he saw the nine-tailed inferno fox, this fellow had always been disdainful of his cultivation. His cultivation was really unbearable in the eyes of the nine-tailed inferno fox. However, he also understood that compared to the nine-tailed inferno fox, he was indeed very weak. Baptism of a god and devil. Di Xiaofeng narrowed his eyes. Hearing this name, he felt that it wasn't simple. Perhaps with their current strength, they could only passively accept all of this. They didn't have the qualifications to understand the purpose of this thing appearing here. Di Beichun turned his gaze after hearing Di Xiaofeng's words. Big brother, what do you mean by this? The nine-tailed inferno fox told me this. Di Xiaofeng immediately told Di Beichun what the nine-tailed inferno fox said. It seemed to say a lot, but in reality, there wasn't much content. The only thing they knew was that staying here was good for them, and their luck was good. This situation didn't happen often. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. She didn't think too much about it. This scene was indeed very helpful to them. Since it's a rare opportunity, we should seize it. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. Anyway, we've already been to most of the places marked on the map. It's very fast to cultivate here. Who knows, we might be able to take the opportunity to improve our cultivation again. After seeing such an environment, Chen Feng and the others could no longer suppress their desire to cultivate. Previously, they had been watching Bailey Hongzhuang and the others cultivate, and they had been extremely envious. Now that this opportunity was right in front of them, how could they give it up? All right. Everyone nodded and found a place to sit on the ground and began to cultivate. Xiao Sou and the others were circling around the statue. Such an incredible thing might represent a very powerful inheritance. If they could obtain this inheritance, it was obvious how much they would improve without even thinking about it. However, just as they were searching, they suddenly found Bailey Hongzhuang and the others sitting down to cultivate. What was going on? Are they going to give up on finding the inheritance just like that? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Cultivating here was naturally very fast. However, that kind of harvest was definitely not comparable to obtaining the inheritance. Deliberately mystifying. Xiao Shou curled her lips. Ignore them. We'll just look for ourselves. Chapter 5889. It was impossible for anyone to remain calm in the face of such an opportunity. However, they didn't expect that the nine-tailed Inferno Fox had already told Bailey Hongzhuang and the others about the situation, so they naturally didn't need to waste any effort. If there really was an inheritance here, it would have been obtained by the cultivators of the immortal domain long ago. The demon summoning scripture operated at full speed, and light energy poured into her body. Coupled with the enlightenment of the light god statue, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that not only was her cultivation increasing, but her understanding was also increasing. This trip to the ancient battlefield had been of great help to her. Although she had grasped the power of light before, she never knew how to use it in battle. It wasn't until she saw the wood binding technique that she realized the use of the attribute transformation technique was so great. If the wood attribute could do it, the light attribute could do it too. Moreover, the light attribute was known as one of the strongest attributes, so it would naturally be more useful. The cyclone appeared again, and the feeling of endless energy pouring in her body was simply too satisfying. Di Xiaofeng and the others also experienced the feeling of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others previously. If they could continue to cultivate in such an environment, their strength would definitely far surpass cultivators of the same age when they went out. Xiao Shou and the others searched along the way, but apart from the statue, there was nothing else. When they noticed Bailey Hongzhuang and the others who were peacefully cultivating, they felt a burst of unhappiness. If they gave up at this moment, it would be tantamount to losing face. However, if they kept searching and didn't cultivate, the other party's cultivation would surpass theirs, and they would waste even more time. Tangled. Xiao Shou's heart was incomparably tangled. She hated the feeling of being inferior to the other party. No matter what, the other party seemed to see through things one step ahead of her. She just didn't understand why. 2 days later, Nangong Yuqing and the others also gave up the idea of continuing to search. In these 2 days, they had almost looked around the surroundings but didn't find anything at all. As for the base of the light god statue, they had no way of approaching it. Every time they reached a certain distance, there would be a powerful force blocking their path, making it impossible for them to move forward even half an inch. Xiao Shou sat on the ground in defeat. Now it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were right. As for them, they had wasted 2 days. Nangong Yuqing sat on the ground and couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. This man had been like a leader since the beginning. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he knew in his heart that the gap between them was gradually widening. Di Beichen is a practitioner of the dark attribute. Why is he able to cultivate here? Xiao Sudong was puzzled. Previously, when Di Beichen was able to stand here, he did not feel that it was strange because Di Beichen's strength was relatively strong, so he could resist some discomfort. However, he had actually stayed here for 2 days. During these 2 days, he had been cultivating. No matter how one looked at it, this was impossible. Maybe he was just pretending. Xiao Shou raised her eyebrows, but her voice carried a bit of guilt. Even she herself could not believe that Di Beichen had stayed here for 2 full days just for this one breath. This didn't seem to be his style. Chapter 5890. After hearing the news of Jun Lingxuan's death, Nangong Yuqing's heart was once again filled with hope. He had always liked Xiao Shou, and this feeling had lasted for many years. However, Due to the engagement between Xiao Sou and Jun Lingxuan, he no longer had a chance and had chosen to give up. Who would have thought that Jun Lingxuan would actually die? With this, he naturally had hope. However, not long after Nangong Yuqing finished speaking, a huge aura suddenly resounded. Deep Beichen had broken through. Level 7 Radiant Moon. Nangong Yuqing stared blankly at this scene and couldn't help but lament inwardly. Are you doing this on purpose? Why didn't you break through earlier or later? Why did you have to break through right after he said those words? Do you dislike me that much? Naturally, Di Beichun was unaware of Nangong Yuqing's thoughts. In fact, he was so immersed in his cultivation that he didn't even pay attention to the conversation between Nangong Yuqing and the rest. With the development of his heavenly fate physique and his master's inheritance, his cultivation method had changed as well. Although his current cultivation method was more suited for the darkness attribute, his cultivation speed wasn't slow due to the fact that he had dual attributes. The advantage of his heavenly fate physique was fully displayed. Even Chun Feng's breakthrough speed couldn't compare to Di Beichun's. Looking at Di Beichun's rapid breakthrough speed, Nangong Yuqing's lips curled into a smile. This guy had truly snatched away his first-place title. If it had been snatched away by someone else, he would have done everything he could to snatch it back. However, since this person was Di Beichun, he didn't care. This guy was destined to soar into the sky. Bang! Another aura of a breakthrough could be felt. When Di Beichun broke through to level 8 Radiant Moon, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped cultivating as well. The fearsomeness of a heavenly fate physique was fully displayed. Logically speaking, since Di Beichun's cultivation was higher than others, his breakthrough speed should have been slower. However, this was not reflected during his cultivation. Not only was his speed not slower than the others, it was actually faster than them. The demon summoning scripture was a heaven-defying cultivation method. In the past, because her cultivation method was of a higher level, she could still keep up with Beichun's cultivation speed. But now, the gap was gradually appearing. The heavenly mandate physique was indeed the most suitable physique for cultivation. Beichun, should we go over there and take a look? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the statue of darkness in the distance. If Beichun wanted to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, he naturally needed a deeper understanding of the power of darkness. Now that this opportunity was in front of them, it would be a pity if they didn't go. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichun looked to the other side and nodded. Okay. After the two spoke to Di Xiaofeng, they walked in the direction of the Statue of Darkness. It was said that other than Huang Futing and the others, all the other dark attribute cultivators were gathered there at the moment. Maybe there would be some unexpected surprises there. As the two walked forward, Xiao Sou also opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were filled with doubt and puzzlement, but there was also a trace of envy. These two people seemed to be inseparable from the beginning. Even if she was unwilling to admit it, she could feel the love from the bottom of his heart every time she noticed the way Di Beichun looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. And no one had ever looked at her with such eyes. Chapter 5891. The coercion here is so strong. Looking at the place where darkness and light intersected, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with dread. Standing here, she felt as if there was an invisible force that wanted to crush her into the ground. She could faintly sense a terrifying, murderous aura. Clearly, there was nothing here. Could it be that this was a battle between the two statues? Indeed, let's lower our bodies and rush over quickly. Di Beichun looked serious. Based on their cultivation, it would be difficult for them to survive in such a battle. Fortunately, the two statues were too tall. They were at the bottom, and the pressure was the least. If they were in midair, they would be torn to pieces by the two forces. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. She did not dare to delay at a time like this. The two of them used their fastest movement techniques and rushed forward. Even so, they could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood when they neared the intersection. Their blood and qi surged. Bailey Hongzhuang heaved a sigh of relief when they reached the area of darkness. The pressure had disappeared. "Wife, how are you?" Di Beichun asked as he took out a pill and handed it to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang swallowed the pill and smiled. "Don't worry, it's only a minor injury. I'll recover very soon." "That's good." Di Beichun heaved a sigh of relief and looked ahead. "Speaking of which, it's quite interesting. Previously, when we were over there, I only felt that it was pitch black and I couldn't see anything clearly. I didn't think that after coming here, I would still be able to see everything clearly in this darkness. Yes, this is truly miraculous." Bailey Hongzhuang's face was full of surprise. This was also beyond her imagination. This feeling, it was as if the entire world was black to begin with. Apart from this, nothing else was affected. One black and one white were like two different worlds. They were two completely different worlds, yet they had something in common. The power of darkness here is so dense. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and grabbed Di Beichun's hand. "Let's go take a look. This is a good opportunity to comprehend the power of darkness." Di Beichun smiled faintly, his eyes filled with tenderness. "Okay." As the two of them gradually approached, Huang Futing and the others also noticed Di Beichun's group, and their faces immediately revealed expressions of joy. "Young master." When Di Beichun looked around, he immediately discovered that apart from the original team, there were indeed many more darkness-type cultivators. When he noticed Di Beichun's gaze, Huang Futing immediately explained. "Young master, many of them are mercenaries, but there are also cultivators from other clans." Huang Futing walked to Di Beichun's side and said in a low voice, "Sects don't accept dark attribute cultivators. Only families have such cultivators, but they are usually very low-key. In the past 2 days, we have gotten to know them. They're all good people." Di Beichun nodded slightly. He understood that Huang Futing wanted to recruit more darkness-type cultivators. "Young Master Di." Although the other cultivators were very surprised by the way Huang Futing and the others addressed Di Beichun, they all had some understanding of the famous Di Beichun. Among the darkness-type cultivators, he had the most glorious life. Not only that, but the power of darkness he mastered was also much stronger than ordinary people. Chapter 5892. After hearing Di Beichun's words, the originally nervous crowd quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Their nervousness seemed to have been dispelled in an instant. They only felt that the approachable Di Beichun made them feel very relaxed. However, when everyone noticed that the Holy Maiden of Light was also here, they couldn't help but feel a little worried. The Holy Assembly of Light was the place that was most resistant to the dark attribute. Usually, they were full of fear of the Holy Assembly of Light. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang knew their identity, now that their lives and the family were already difficult, if something happened, they would undoubtedly be abandoned by the family. Feeling everyone's eyes full of fear, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said, "I know what you're thinking, but you can take back your worries. I don't discriminate against dark attribute cultivators at all. Not to mention, my husband is of the dark attribute." As soon as these words came out, everyone was slightly stunned. After looking between the two for a moment, they all understood. Thinking about it carefully, their worries were indeed a little unnecessary. Based on what had happened in the past, it seemed that no matter when, Bailey Hongzhuang had always been on Di Beichun's side and had never wavered. For a moment, everyone's faces also showed a kind smile. Noticing the changes in everyone, Bailey Hongzhuang also felt a little emotional. Although there were many cultivators at the Light God statue, many of them were not harmonious on the surface, and there were many conflicts. Even if they were cultivating, they had to be on guard everywhere, worried that someone would sneak an attack at any time. Although the number of cultivators here was far less than on the other side, everyone was of one mind. Perhaps it was because they were all weak and had experienced the feeling of being discriminated against by others, so they were more sympathetic to each other and huddled together for warmth. At this moment, she felt that if the Holy Assembly of Darkness was really established, it would be an extremely cohesive and united sacred assembly. This was because they had the same belief. This was because there was no barrier between them. This was because they all had the idea of being sympathetic to each other. These did not seem to be great things, but once it became a barrier, it would erupt with power far beyond one's imagination. She began to look forward to the day when the Holy Assembly of Darkness was established. She had always been proud of Bewitching. Looking at the statue of darkness in front of him, the feeling of devout worship still existed, but unlike the statue of light, it seemed to be more unrestrained here. Bewitching naturally noticed this as well and was somewhat surprised. It seems that there are other differences between the two statues apart from their attributes, Bewitching said after some thought. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. I feel more at ease cultivating here, because those annoying fellows aren't here to distract us. Bewitching smiled faintly. It's quieter here with fewer people. Let's cultivate in peace. Okay, Bailey Hongzhuang replied. In the next instant, she sat on the ground and looked at the completely black statue that seemed like a devil god. She began to comprehend and cultivate. In terms of darkness attribute, she was no match for Bewitching. Although she also had dual attributes, she knew that her power was more inclined towards light energy, so she had to take this opportunity to strengthen her dark energy. Chapter 5893. Everyone was once again immersed in their cultivation. It had to be said that this cultivation speed made everyone feel as if they had been injected with stimulants. Rich dark power poured into her body. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly channeled the demon summoning scripture, but her mind was trying to comprehend more uses of the dark attribute. As the inheritor of the dark holy sun, Bewitching's understanding of dark power was clearly on a higher level. Of course, Bewitching also told her everything. However, as such a powerful force, it was impossible to completely grasp it in a short time. At this moment, looking at the darkness god statue, she had a completely different feeling from usual. Perhaps there were too few things about dark power in the upper realm. The other attributes could be comprehended through various treasures, but dark power seemed to have disappeared without a trace in the upper realm. Therefore, the darkness god statue was particularly precious at this moment. Time passed slowly. Everyone was like an old monk in meditation. Other than the sound of the wind, there was no other movement. Bailey Hongzhuang also watched motionlessly. During this half a month, she had also vaguely understood something. Bewitching, I seem to understand the difference between these two powers. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said, light power can be used to enhance the abilities of teammates, and, at the same time, it has a certain healing effect. From his point of view, light power is more used to help others, while dark power is different. The power of darkness is used for self-improvement. All of its power is used to enhance one's own strength and techniques. Bewitching nodded slightly. Perhaps this is why the two powers don't like each other. He had always felt that each attribute was on its own, so he did not understand why so many powers could coexist, but they were unwilling to accept dark power. In the process of comprehending, he gradually understood something. Light could coexist with other attributes, but dark power did not need the cooperation of any other attribute. It was enough on its own. It was precisely because of this kind of unsociability that such a situation occurred. However, it was hard to say who was better or worse in this kind of matter. There was nothing wrong with helping each other, but relying on oneself without any help was also a kind of strength. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. This is the reason why the light god statue can accommodate so many cultivators, but there are only dark cultivators here. To be honest, as a cultivator, teamwork was unavoidable. However, wasn't the pursuit of personal strength everyone's goal? Therefore, it was impossible to tell who was right and who was wrong between the two. I suddenly feel like we're doing quite well. Dual attributes. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. If it was any other dual attribute, it would be fine, but it just had to be darkness and light, which was very interesting. She didn't want to think too much about it. The hostility between the two sides wasn't something that the two of them could resolve. All they could do was to become stronger and protect the people they cared about. That was all. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, their hearts filled with a trace of optimism. After thinking it through, he felt that everything wasn't so scary anymore. After staying here for half a month, Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation had broken through to the 9th level of the Radiant Moon Realm. Chapter 5894. Even Huang Futing couldn't help but exclaim in his heart when he saw the two's terrifying breakthroughs. Although everyone's breakthroughs were fast, these two were still the fastest. It was especially so after their cultivation base had also risen to the Radiant Moon Realm. Only then did they realize that the elemental energy required for each minor advancement was much more than before. To be able to improve so much in half a month, even compared to the many geniuses at the Statue of Light, they were undoubtedly the most outstanding. Meanwhile, on the other side, Qing Devil appeared in everyone's sight. Noticing Malachian Fiend's appearance, everyone's expression changed. I didn't expect the Statue of Light to appear. Looking at the Statue of Light in front of him, Qing Devil's eyes were full of surprise. When he first came here, he wanted to see the Statue of Light. As long as he could win the battle and be baptized by the Statue of Light, his status would be much higher than before when he returned to the immortal realm. He came to this battlefield with endless yearning, but he didn't expect the situation to be completely different from what he had imagined. Over the years, his spiritual strength had been very weak, so he didn't release his perception. He didn't know whether the Statue of Light had appeared or not. But now, when he had almost given up on this idea, the Statue of Light actually appeared. Qing Devil. Looking at Qing Devil, Xiao So couldn't hide the surprise in her eyes. After such a long time, she hadn't seen Qing Devil. She was worried that something might have happened to Qing Devil. Fortunately, he was safe and sound. Compared with Xiao Sou's joy, the members of the Jun family were indignant. Qing Devil, you killed our young master. How dare you show up? The cultivators of the Jun family stared at Qing Devil with hatred. Their faces were flushed with anger. Looking at the face that was exactly the same as their young master's, they felt extremely complicated. Looking at the cultivators of the Jun family, Qing Devil looked quite calm. He had never taken the other members of the Jun family seriously. However, he had to be afraid of Di Xiaofeng. After Azure Demon appeared, Di Xiaofeng's gaze also fell on him. The two of them stared at each other with equal harshness. According to his understanding of the nine-tailed Inferno Fox, asking him to help would definitely require a large price, but for what he saw so far, Di Xiaofeng didn't seem to be affected too much. What was going on? He had already rushed here after sensing the appearance of the Statue of Light, but because it was too troublesome after it appeared, he had stayed in the distance. However, he knew very well that the closer he was to the Divine Light statue, the better the effect of this cultivation. Despite all the effort he had put into cultivating this body, it was still only at the 7th level of the Radiant Moon Realm. He was unwilling to stay outside and cultivate, so he chose to come here. The baptism of the statue was something he had been longing for all these years. How could he miss it because of this group of people? He wasn't willing to fight here, nor was he willing to cause more trouble. He only wanted to return to the celestial realm after the baptism, to return to that place he was incomparably familiar with. He had been away from Qing Devil for so many years. It was time for him to go back. Chapter 5895. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. They looked at Jun Lingxuan in disbelief, and their minds were in chaos. The Jun family, who had been thinking about revenge against a common enemy, were completely dumbfounded at this moment. Looking at the identical face in front of them, they really didn't know how to judge. Don't lie to us. You have already admitted that you have possessed our young master. How can you still be alive? That's right. Now you've been betrayed by everyone. So you deliberately made up this pretense to deal with us. I'm telling the truth. Jun Lingxuan emphasized. The Qing Devil hasn't found a target to possess for so many years. His soul power has been very weak. In fact, I've been fighting with him all this time. If he has really possessed me, why hasn't he hurt you with his identity and strength? That's because of me. Jun Lingxuan looked sincere, After fighting with the nine-tailed inferno fox, his soul was injured again, so I took the opportunity to take back the initiative. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to come here in his situation. Xiao So looked at the person in front of her. She was sure that this person was definitely the Qing devil, because when she was with the Qing devil before, she had already asked the Qing devil this question. The Qing devil clearly told her that Jun Lingxuan no longer existed. Obviously, all this was just the Qing devil's disguise. However, she didn't care. As long as the Qing devil could come back, as long as the Qing devil was willing to be with her, everything else was not a problem. Di Xiaofeng and others looked at Jun Lingxuan's disguise with a sarcastic smile in their eyes. He would be a fool if he believed such a lie. This guy must have known that he would be targeted by all of us after coming here, so he deliberately pretended to be Jun Lingxuan. Lin Taxing lowered his voice, and his eyebrows were full of disdain. How arrogant was the previous Qing devil? Unexpectedly, he had to use such a despicable means now. Do you think the Jun family will believe it? Lin Yi was a little worried. If they really believed it, wouldn't the situation return to the beginning? Ao Lingxiao looked at Lin Yi's worried look and comforted. Don't worry. The Jun family are not fools. They shouldn't believe it. I hope so. Lin Yi nodded slightly. The destruction of the marriage alliance between the Jun family and the Xiao family was extremely good news for them. They couldn't let Azure Demon ruin everything. If everything this guy said was false, then wouldn't they be finished? However, just after Xiao Sudong said this, Xiao Sou quickly rushed to Jun Lingxuan's side. She looked at Jun Lingxuan carefully, and her face showed ecstasy. Yes, he is Ling's son. He is Ling's son. Xiao Sou's eyes were full of tears. Her delicate and beautiful face was full of excitement. I recognized his eyes. He must be my Ling's son. Everyone present looked at Xiao Sou's sudden performance, and they were all dumbfounded. The Jun family's cultivators were originally in doubt. At this moment, when they heard Xiao Sou's words, they were inclined to believe it. Chapter 5896. Big Sister, is what you said true? Xiao Sudong couldn't help but ask. Why did he feel that this matter was so strange? Xiao Sou coldly glanced at Xiao Sudong and said, Of course it's true. Could it be that I'm mistaken? Hearing this, Xiao Sudong could only shut his mouth, but his mind couldn't help but think, didn't his big sister not see through the Qing devil's disguise? Brother-in-law, it's good that you're back. We were sad for a long time when we thought you had fallen. Jun Lingxuan's face was filled with joy and a wide smile. I'm also very glad. I didn't expect to be able to regain control. It's really a narrow escape. The Jun family's cultivators also let go of their inner suspicions. Since Miss Xiao was so sure, it must be true. Originally, when they knew that the young master had fallen, it was as if they had lost their backbone and were extremely sad. Because not only did this mean that they had lost their backbone, but the marriage between the young master and Miss Xiao couldn't be completed. The entire Jun family would be greatly affected. During this period of time, they clearly felt that everyone was looking down on them, completely losing their previous attitude. Now that the young master was back, the situation they were worried about would not happen. Everyone could be at ease. Bailey Yinyin stared at this scene, dumbfounded. Even they knew that this Jun Lingxuan must be the Qing devil in disguise. What was Xiao Soa doing? Even if it was the same body, but the soul was different, she must be able to feel it. Women's feelings in this regard were sharper than ordinary people. She didn't believe that Xiao Soa couldn't tell. Di Xiaofeng and the others also looked at each other. This situation, even they were deeply puzzled. Suddenly, Di Xiaofeng suddenly said, I suddenly understand what Bewitching meant. Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Di Xiaofeng. What did Bewitching say? Didn't he say that he thought that Xiao So might do something that we all find unbelievable? Di Xiaofeng's eyebrows slanted, and his lips curled into a playful and ironic smile. Everyone also remembered the scene when Di Beichun said these words. At that time, they didn't quite understand the true meaning of these words. But at this moment, after seeing what Xiao Soa did, they also understood it. It turned out that Beichin had already guessed that Xiao Soa would make such a choice. She did it deliberately. She knew that this person was Qing Devil, but she wanted to deceive the Jun family and the Xiao family. Is Xiao Soa crazy? Is it possible that she will do this unscrupulously to defeat us? Lin Yi found it hard to understand. Even if the other party was strong and beneficial to her, he killed her fiancé. Bali Yanche looked at everyone's expression and suddenly said, Xiao Soa should have fallen in love with Qing Devil. In her heart, Qing Devil's position is higher than Jun Lingxuan, so she doesn't care about all this at all. What she wants is just to be with Qing Devil. Ling also said. As the two of them spoke, everyone felt as if they were struck by lightning. This thought was too terrifying. If it were an ordinary person, who could make such a decision? However, it was clear that Xiao Se Wu had truly done so. Then what should we do? Lin Taxing looked at Di Xiaofeng. This Qing Devil was a scourge for them. Chapter 5897. Di Xiaofeng's face darkened slightly. In such a situation, Xiao So obviously wanted to protect Qing Devil. If Beichin was here, he would definitely take action without hesitation. If he could solve these two troubles on the ancient battlefield, his family situation would be much better after returning. However, Beichin was not here now. With his cultivation, he might not be a match for Qing Devil. If he asked the nine-tailed Inferno Fox to come out in such a short time, he might have to pay a higher price. His cultivation would regress, he would be seriously injured, and he might not be able to cultivate for a month. He had to take all these into consideration. Chun Feng, Murong Jing, and the others also noticed this rather complicated situation. If Di Xiaofeng took action, they would also take action. The only trouble was that this kind of cultivation opportunity was what every cultivator dreamed of. No one was willing to miss it. Moreover, no one knew when this statue of light would disappear. After thinking about all these situations, Di Xiaofeng said in a deep voice, Let's not take action for the time being. We'll make a decision after Beichin and the others come back. Since Qing Devil had come, as long as the statue of light did not disappear, he would not leave. Therefore, during this period, they could completely treat time as if it had stopped and just wait with peace of mind. Hearing Di Xiaofeng's words, everyone nodded slightly. It was not a bad idea to bide their time. Chu Yingming and the others originally thought that Di Xiaofeng and Jun Lingxuan were going to take action. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to reap the benefits, it would undoubtedly be the best. However, they did not expect that both sides would bide their time, which was beyond their expectations. After waiting for a while, seeing that both sides had no intention to take action, they simply closed their eyes and entered the state of cultivation again. At this time, it would be a waste if they did not cultivate. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were completely unaware of what was happening on the other side. They were just immersed in cultivation. However, at this moment, the ground suddenly began to tremble. Noticing this, they opened their eyes one after another and looked at the statue of darkness in front of them. In fact, they had always been mentally prepared. It was impossible for the statue of darkness to exist forever. It could disappear at any time. All they could do was pray that it would last a little longer. In this way, their cultivation would be able to increase even more. However, they did not expect that the darkness god statue would disappear so quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed in her heart, but she had no regrets. After all, the appearance of these two statues was a pleasant surprise. After feeling the ground tremble, everyone just looked at the statue devoutly, waiting for the statue to disappear. Come to think of it, such a scene was also very shocking. However, the expected situation did not occur. Instead, everyone noticed that the statue had begun to change. What's going on? The statue can actually change? Huang Futing looked at the scene in front of him in astonishment. When such a tall and terrifying statue transformed, the momentum was also very shocking. Everyone raised their heads to look at this scene. However, other than the darkness above, they could not see anything clearly. The only thing they could feel was that the statue was changing. A look of anticipation appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's pretty face. I wonder what this change means. Chapter 5898. It's not just us that's shaking. The Statue of Light seems to be shaking as well. Bewitching's eyes were filled with a thoughtful luster, and his handsome face was serious. Although he was under the Statue of Darkness and the distance between the two statues was very far, he could still feel some movement on the other side. These two statues might have the same changes. Bailey Hongzhuang guessed, but her eyes became brighter and brighter. Don't you think this situation is very interesting? They're obviously opposite, but they're synchronized. Bewitching smiled faintly. Indeed, but I'm afraid we'll have to wait until we go to the upper realm to figure out all of this. Just as the two of them were talking, the ground finally stopped shaking. Only then did everyone realize that a black door had appeared at the bottom of the Statue of Darkness. The entire door was black and appeared under the Statue of Darkness. Although it was not obvious, everyone still noticed at a glance. The door seemed to have an endless attraction, attracting them to go forward. Look, there's a door there. Does this mean we can go in? Let's go in and take a look. This statue is so amazing. There might be precious treasures inside. Everyone looked at each other, their eyes shining with anticipation. This was too attractive to them. In their eyes, this statue had already exceeded the scope of a human. Obtaining the inheritance of a human would allow one to improve greatly, let alone obtaining the inheritance of a god. Once they obtained it, they might really become gods in the future. Huang Futing and the others turned their gazes to Bewitching. Bewitching was their leader. Let's go and take a look, but we must be careful, Bewitching warned. If this place was not filled with treasure, but full of danger, perhaps none of them would be able to escape. Yes, everyone nodded, and the excitement in their eyes grew stronger. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other, and the two of them slowly approached. When they were cultivating earlier, they had already tested it. The closer they were to the Statue of Darkness, the faster their cultivation speed would be. However, when they got close to a certain distance, a layer of barrier blocked them, making them unable to move forward at all. Now that a door had suddenly appeared, if they couldn't pass through the barrier, they still wouldn't be able to enter. As the two of them gradually approached the Statue of Darkness, they were surprised to find that the barrier had disappeared at some point, and they were able to approach the Statue of Darkness with ease. Noticing this, a trace of joy appeared on everyone's faces. Standing in front of the black door, they noticed that the door, which looked ordinary from afar, was actually engraved with many totems. Although they couldn't understand the totems and words, everyone could feel the mysterious aura coming from them. This was definitely not a random drawing. There must be some meaningful content, but it was a pity that they could not understand it. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully looked at the totem and words on it. This pen seemed to be filled with extremely terrifying power. Even though she was just looking at it, she felt like her soul was being shaken. What a terrifying power. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. She tried to memorize the content in her mind. Chapter 5899. Bewitching looked at the unfamiliar totem in front of him, and an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. He had never seen it before, but he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. These mysterious patterns and words were intertwined together, as if trying to explain something. However, they had never seen such a language before, so they could not determine the content. How great would it be if we could understand these words? Huang Futing could not help but sigh. He could feel the power of these words, and he could guess that the content was not simple. If they could understand all of this, they would have a better understanding of this statue. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows were slightly wrinkled, and her phoenix eyes showed a thoughtful expression. This should be a very ancient language, just like how this statue has stood here for many years. Everyone nodded. The words had undergone many changes since ancient times, and there were too few people who knew about this ancient language. Unless If they went back and looked for someone who studied ancient words, they might be able to understand the content. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at the words in silence. This kind of feeling that came from the bottom of their hearts was too magical. They even wondered if this was an inheritance of the light and darkness attributes. How powerful were Bai Yunjiao and He Xinjun? They must have obtained an extremely powerful attribute inheritance to become the Holy Maiden and Holy Son of Darkness. However, Linger said that she had never been to this place, so it was hard to say. The other cultivators all looked at the door. If they pushed open this door, perhaps they would see a brand new world. They were eager to open this door, but standing in front of it, they lacked the courage to do so. This door was like Pandora's box, full of attraction, but they were worried that if they opened it, there would be unbearable consequences. After a long while, Huang Futing mustered up his courage and tried to push open the door. However, after using all his strength, he found that the door was still tightly shut and it did not budge. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. More cultivators tried to push open the door, but they found that the door was like a mountain and they could not move it at all. This situation was like a bucket of cold water being poured over everyone's head, extinguishing their original excitement. It seems that it will take some time to open this door, Huang Futing said with a complicated expression. For a time, everyone surrounded the door and began to search. Since such a door had appeared, there must be a way to open it. Perhaps there were precious treasures inside, so how could they miss it? While everyone was trying to find a way, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were like old monks in meditation, looking at the words above. For some reason, the more they looked at these words, the more they felt a mysterious power. As he immersed himself in this profound feeling, he seemed to have made some progress in his understanding of the power of darkness. This was an indescribable feeling, but the two of them were completely immersed in it. After Huang Futing and the others noticed the state of Di Beichun and Di Beichun, they were a little surprised. Chapter 5900. Huang Fu. I finally understand why the young master is different from us. When he cultivates, he's much more terrifying than we are. The man sighed emotionally. When Di Beichun was cultivating, the black vortex was much larger than theirs and his cultivation speed was much faster than theirs. No wonder Di Beichun was able to become the young master of the Di family despite possessing the darkness attribute. If they missed out on such a peerless genius, it would be the greatest loss to the family. On the other hand, they did not have a cultivation method after awakening the darkness attribute. Even though they were quite strong before, they were gradually overtaken by everyone else and did not stand out at all. Looking at the man's emotional appearance, Huang Futing smiled calmly and patted his shoulder. Don't think about the past. Now that we're able to follow the young master, this is our greatest opportunity. Hearing this, a trace of a smile appeared on the man's face. You're right. Now that I think about it, our luck is quite good. After looking at it for a few hours, Bailey Hongzhuang finally came back to her senses. Seeing that Huang Futing and the others were trying to find a way to open the door, she asked in surprise, "Can't you find a way to open the door?" "We can't." Huang Futing shook his head helplessly and looked around dejectedly. "We've already looked around, but apart from these words and diagrams, there's nothing else. We haven't found anything." Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze turned slightly as she looked at the wall and door in front of her and slowly said, "Then let's keep looking. There's always a way. It's just that we haven't found it yet." Her clear and pleasant voice was filled with certainty and confidence. She was not unfamiliar with this situation. As long as a door appeared, it could definitely be opened. It just depended on whether they could find a way to open it. Thinking back to when they had found the historical remnant, they had experienced a similar situation. Perhaps a single detail that they had accidentally missed was the key to opening the door. Everyone nodded. If the door could be opened directly, they would be somewhat fearful. Now that they were stopped from entering, they felt much more at ease. After all, in the face of such a powerful existence, they did not even have the strength to resist. They had to be careful at all times to be safe. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichun, who was still in a state of comprehension, and her eyes were filled with a vast ocean of gentleness. Out of everyone, Di Beichun's darkness attribute was the most outstanding. His comprehension was definitely the richest. She did not disturb Di Beichun. To enter a state of meditation was a rare situation. Who knows, perhaps if he entered a state for a while longer. It would be a pity if he was forcefully interrupted. A voice attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked at the source of the voice in astonishment, only to find that Bailey Hongzhuang was standing in front of the door, her hands making a pushing motion. In an instant, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. Previously, everyone had tried to push the door open. When they realized that it was to no avail, they had even joined forces to try using brute force. The door was as stable as Mount Tai and did not budge at all. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had only given a gentle push and the door had actually loosened. Isn't the difference a little too great? Chapter 5901. Miss Bailey, you can actually push this door open? Huang Futing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in amazement. This was simply too unbelievable. How is this possible? All of us couldn't push it open before. The rest of the cultivators looked at each other. This situation was simply too strange. Bailey Hongzhuang was also at a loss. She didn't expect such a situation to occur. She just wanted to give it a try on impulse, and the door actually reacted. Miss Bailey, why don't you try to push this door open? Huang Futing asked. Originally, they all thought that there must be some kind of mechanism nearby, and only by finding the mechanism could they possibly open the door. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's situation seemed to be a little different from what they had imagined. Everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with great anticipation. Although they couldn't understand how the Holy Maiden of the Light could push this door open, they obviously weren't in the mood to think too much at this time. I'll try, Bailey Hongzhuang responded. Looking at the dark door in front of her, her mood was a little complicated. She felt that this door had a mysterious and powerful force, and it seemed to have some kind of unclear relationship with them. What did it mean for her to be able to push this door open, creak? Under Bailey Hongzhuang's push, the closed mysterious door made a dull sound, and gradually, a crack appeared on the door. Everyone acutely sensed that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't use any attribute power at all. She only used the simplest force to push, and the door began to loosen. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang was the person chosen by this door. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang pushed the door open a gap, no matter how she tried to push it open, it was useless. No, Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand with a helpless expression. I can't open this door. She didn't expect to be able to push this door open, but she expected that she couldn't completely open it. It was like a woman's sixth sense. She had this feeling in the unseen world. This is already very good, Huang Futing comforted. Although everyone couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, it was still much better to have a crack than to have it tightly shut before. What should we do now? This door doesn't seem to be opened by a mechanism. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. It seemed that they had no other choice. Many cultivators began to try again to see if they could push open the door that had already opened a crack. However, the results were very disappointing. Bailey Hongzhuang took a few steps back and looked at the door. Her gaze involuntarily shifted to Di Beichun. She couldn't open this door, but perhaps Beichun could. When the other cultivators tried again and found that they still couldn't open the door, they all leaned against the door and looked inside through the gap. Even if there was only a small crack, it would be great if they could determine what was going on inside. Did you see anything? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Huang Futing shook his head. It's still pitch black inside. I can't see anything. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't find this strange. In fact, from the moment they arrived at the Statue of Darkness, everything was pitch black. Chapter 5902. Looking at Di Beichun, who was still in a meditative state, Bailey Hongzhuang turned her attention to the text in the totem again. Although she had already exited from the meditative state, it was good to remember more. Maybe in the future, she would have a chance to clarify everything. Moreover, when she went back, she could ask Grandma Hua for advice. One day later, everyone noticed that Di Beichun, who had been motionless for a long time, finally moved. When Di Beichun exited from the meditative state, he only felt that his eyes were sore and his head was swollen. He couldn't help but frown and rub his head, not understanding what had happened. Just as he turned his eyes, he found that everyone was looking at him. "Why are you all looking at me?" "Beichun, you've been looking at these words for a day." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Di Beichun was slightly surprised. He felt that he had only looked at it for a moment. "It's already been a day." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently, a smile on her lips like the wind. "Yes, try and see if you can open this door." Hearing this, Di Beichun turned his gaze to the door. After discovering that the door had been opened a crack, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes that were as deep as the sea. "This door has been opened a crack?" "Young master, when Miss Bailey pushed this door, the door opened a crack, but it couldn't be opened after that. So we think that maybe you can open this door." Huang Futing smiled. In the past day, they had tried many times, but to no avail. So they could only pin all their hopes on Di Beichun. If Di Beichun couldn't open it, they might really have no fate with this door. Di Beichun turned his eyes to Bailey Hongzhuang, only to see Bailey Hongzhuang smiling and raising her fist to cheer him on. The woman's beautiful face was playful and sly, and the two little fists she waved were indescribably cute. Di Beichun nodded dotingly. "I'll try." Seeing that Di Beichun was going to try, everyone's faces were filled with anticipation. Whether or not they could enter this door depended on this. Standing in front of the door and looking at the crack, Di Beichun stretched out his hand and pushed. Rumble. The door that had been motionless all this time was pushed open by Di Beichun's casual push. Seeing this scene, everyone's eyes lit up and they couldn't help but feel surprised. It seemed that their judgment was right. Only Di Beichun was able to open this door. So young master is really the chosen one. Oh my God! Even though this inheritance belongs to young Master Di, it's still good that we're lucky enough to be able to enter and take a look. No wonder we couldn't push it away. Look, young Master Di pushed it away casually. However, Di Beichun looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. In fact, he didn't believe that he could really open this door. He just thought that everyone's reaction was very interesting, so he wanted to give it a try. Are you surprised? Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. "I thought you would definitely be able to open it. You were in the same situation when you pushed open a crack." Di Beichun smiled. Chapter 5903. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's proud look, the smile in Di Beichun's eyes became more and more intense. He reached out his hand to rub the former soft hair and said with a low smile, "Let's go in." Bailey Hongzhuang raised her head and nodded with a smile. Some of the cultivators could not hold back the curiosity in their hearts. After the door opened, they had already poked their heads out to look inside. Now that they saw Di Beichun and his wife preparing to go in, they naturally did not stay any longer. Originally, everyone could not see anything through the gap, but when the door opened, everyone could clearly see everything inside. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun slowly walked through the door. This was a large hall, and there was no passage, only a large hall. The only difference was that the size of this large hall was beyond everyone's imagination. Just this large hall was larger than the entire ruins they had entered before. Shocking. The moment everyone entered this large hall, their hearts were filled with shock. It was too shocking. Such a large hall was empty, and the surrounding walls and ceiling were painted with many patterns. Di Beichun, look! Bailey Hongzhuang pointed at the words on the wall. These words and the words outside seemed to have different meanings. She did not recognize these words, but she vaguely had a feeling. Not only that, she also noticed that in addition to the words, there were also some human meridian diagrams. If she guessed correctly, what was written here should be related to cultivation. Di Beichun's gaze also fell on the wall. Although he could not understand these words, he could see the meridian diagrams clearly. On the front wall, there were many meridian diagrams, and each of them had a different operating method, which seemed to correspond to many cultivation methods. In the end, Bewitching's gaze condensed on a meridian diagram, and a trace of surprise and contemplation appeared on his sharp and cold face. Wife, what is drawn on that diagram is my current cultivation method. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang slightly raised her eyebrows, and her heart was also filled with surprise. Ever since he received He Xinjuan's inheritance, Di Beiqian changed his cultivation method. Although Beiqian used to cultivate the top cultivation method of the lower realm, there was a huge gap between it and the upper realm and the immortal region. Therefore, Beiqian changed his cultivation method after a little consideration. Of course, this cultivation method was extremely powerful, and it allowed Beiqian to improve faster. However, they now saw Beiqian's cultivation method here. What did this mean? Could Grandmaster have been to this place before? Bailey Hongzhuang was lost in thought. There were many cultivation methods drawn here, and each of them must not be simple. However, she did not find the circulation route of the devil summoning scripture even after searching around the area. Under this comparison, she realized that the demon's summoning scripture she cultivated was extremely complicated. Thinking back to when she first received the demon summoning scripture, she felt that the demon's summoning scripture was different from others. Especially when she first started cultivating, it was very complicated, and her speed was not as fast as normal people. As her cultivation level increased, she became more familiar with the demon's summoning scripture, and the benefits were completely revealed. Chapter 5904. Bailey Hongzhuang studied the four walls. There was too much content written on them. Her thoughts were the same as Bewitching's. These are the most precious treasures. Should we copy these things down now? Bailey Hongzhuang raised an eyebrow. Perhaps we'll be able to understand these words when we reach the immortal region. How rare was this opportunity? Even if she tried her best to memorize it, it would be impossible for her to memorize so much content. Perhaps these things would be of great help to them in the future. She did not want to regret it in the future. That's not a bad suggestion. Beiqian nodded. Regardless of whether it would be useful in the future, it would definitely not be a bad thing to record it down. Of course, with so much content, it would not be easy to record it down. I never thought that the immortal region's language would be different from the upper realms. Xiaohei sighed faintly. Isn't this discrimination on purpose? Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. When we reach the immortal region, we'll use the upper realm's language so that they won't be able to understand it. We'll anger them to death. That's a good idea. Xiaohei smiled. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beiqian were thinking about copying these things down, a terrifying energy suddenly swept out from the Great Hall. A dense dark energy seemed to press down from the top of the Great Hall, enveloping everyone's body. This was a vast and pure dark energy. It was undoubtedly much more powerful than the energy they had absorbed outside. This sudden scene was beyond everyone's expectations. For a moment, everyone could not help but fall into a state of panic. Cries of alarm rang out one after another. The powerful energy grew stronger and stronger. It was as if a huge rock had pressed down on everyone, rendering them immobile on the ground. Even breathing had become exceptionally difficult. Puffed, the enormous pressure crushed their bodies. Some cultivators immediately spat out blood under this pressure. Their internal organs felt as if they were about to be displaced. Death was suddenly incomparably close to them. Wife, don't be afraid. Di Beiqian held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand. Even though his incomparably beautiful face was slightly pale, his deep gaze and gentle voice made Bailey Hongzhuang feel at ease. Looking at Di Beiqian's tender gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang's worry dissipated a little. At this moment, it was as if nothing else mattered. As long as Beiqian was by her side, even if she died, she would be able to face it calmly. As long as you're by my side, I'm not afraid. Bailey Hongzhuang held Di Beiqian's hand tightly. That familiar warmth made her feel at ease. If they had known earlier, if they had known that this would happen, and Beiqian was it of the immortal region, They felt as if a huge beast had run over their bodies. Everyone furrowed their brows and forced themselves to endure the pain. After a while, the crowd finally felt the pressure lessen. They were no longer suffocated from the pressure. Hope of survival reappeared before their eyes once again. The process was extremely long. No one dared to move rashly. They were afraid that the situation would repeat itself, and they would lose their little lives right there and then. Fortunately, that did not happen. Chapter 5905. During this process, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were undoubtedly the first to sit up. This was because under this pressure, the cultivator's physical fitness was also revealed. Usually, they had been paying attention to the improvement of their physical strength. Coupled with the improvement in the Thunder Lake some time ago, their physical strength was undoubtedly much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators. After sitting up straight, Bailey Hongzhuang quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Although this pressure was indeed not small for them, at least it would not directly kill them, giving them more time to breathe. When the other cultivators saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun sit up, they also tried to sit up. Without comparison, there would be no harm. After this attempt, they realized that it was too difficult to stand up under this terrible pressure. It was simply impossible. On the other hand, the two who had already adapted to the pressure could only helplessly maintain their previous positions, hoping that they could gradually get used to the pressure and sit up. After all, the way they were lying here was simply too unsightly. What a strong pressure! I wonder why this happened. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. If it were not for the fact that everyone's strength had increased significantly during this period of time, they would have all lost their lives the moment the pressure appeared. Di Beichun looked around, his handsome eyes revealing a hint of helplessness. I don't know, even if there are hints written on it. We can't understand it. That's also true. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. Everything here, except for the patterns, they couldn't understand anything else at all. Bailey Hongzhuang took out a pen and paper. Under this pressure, it was not easy for her to even move, but she did not want to give up this great opportunity. These things did not look simple. She felt that if there was a chance in the future to understand the content written on it, it would be of great help to them. Beichun. Bailey Hongzhuang handed the note to Di Beichun. Di Beichun's face raised a trace of smile. Wife, I'm afraid that only you and I would still think of copying it this time. So we're a couple. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. I vaguely feel that the content above is the best inheritance. This pressure is the price to pay to obtain the inheritance. That's right, we are a match made in heaven. Di Beichun nodded in agreement. Originally, he wanted to ask the others to help him copy it down, but there was too much content on the wall. It was too difficult for just the two of them to copy it down. However, in the current situation of the others, just resisting this pressure was already very difficult, not to mention copying. Huang Futing found Di Beichun's actions very funny. What they said was true. Under such circumstances, they were still in a mood to copy these completely incomprehensible contents. Young master, your mentality is really good, Huang Futing said with a smile. Di Beichun turned to look at him. We spent so much effort to get in, and now we can't get out. We should at least get something out of this. Hearing this, everyone was even more amused. It was more likely that they had spent so much effort to get in, but Di Beichun had just casually pushed the door open. Okay, where do they spend so much effort? Chapter 5906. The immense pressure crushed every cell in their bodies. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment, and the entire hall seemed to have come to a standstill. All the cultivators lay on the ground for a long time before they mustered the courage to move their bodies. However, they were soon pressed down by the terrifying pressure again. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were the only ones who kept moving their pens. The rustling sound of the pen tip on the paper was the most pleasant sound in the darkness shrine. Both of them looked solemn and serious. Even though they were copying the content that they could not understand at all, they still had a strange feeling in their hearts. It was as if something was right in front of them, but it was always covered by a layer of fog, which prevented them from seeing it clearly. However, under this pressure, they did not feel that their cultivation speed during the process of copying was even faster than usual. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. For 3 whole days, everyone was constantly adapting to the pressure and trying to regain their mobility. On the 3rd day, Huang Futing was finally able to sit up. Phew! Huang Futing took a deep breath, and his entire body relaxed. Although it was a simple action, it was really not easy to do it. In order to sit up, he had tried for 3 whole days before he succeeded. No one could tell him how sad it was. The other cultivators were also constantly trying during this period. When they saw that Huang Futing had succeeded, the eagerness in their eyes intensified. I also temper my body in the Thunder Lock, but compared to you guys, the difference is so huge. Huang Futing could not help but lament. Although his cultivation level had been difficult to improve ever since the awakening of the Dark Power, and he was left behind by the other cultivators, his confidence in himself did not disappear. He initially thought that his physical strength was not bad, but compared to Bewitching and Huiyuhao, there was a huge gap. Perhaps this was what they meant by comparisons are odious. After being tempered in the Thunder Lock, his physical body had become much stronger than before. Now that he thought about it, Bewitching and Huiyuhao must have been paying attention to the improvement in this aspect. Given the current gap, it was impossible for him to catch up. We have tempered our bodies in the past too. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. There are many ways to improve your physical body. In the future, as long as you put in more effort, you will be able to improve it very quickly. Huang Futing nodded slightly. His eyes were deep and complicated. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang made it sound simple, he understood that it was not an easy task. Unlike raising one's cultivation base, raising one's physical strength was filled with pain. Only those with a strong mind could do it. It wasn't just Huang Futing. After experiencing today's events, all the cultivators present had secretly made up their minds to pay attention to improving their physical strength in the future. It was obviously not enough to just raise his own cultivation base. Normally, there would not be any problems, but under such circumstances, the gap was completely revealed. Bewitching handed the pen and paper to Huang Futing. "Help me copy it." Huang Futing was slightly stunned. Before he could speak, he heard Bailey Hongzhuang say, "Start copying from there." "Oh, okay." Huang Futing nodded. He looked at the pen and paper in his hand and began to copy. Chapter 5907. After everyone sat up, they consciously took out pen and paper and began to ask Bailey Hongzhuang where to start copying. As for why they didn't ask the young master, wasn't that obvious? The young master's tasks were all assigned by the young master's wife, so of course they would listen to her. Bewitching looked at everyone asking for advice from Bailey Hongzhuang tacitly, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. These people all had great prospects. After seeing Bewitching's situation, the cultivators from the other forces only felt that it was inconceivable. It would be fine if only a few people were faster than them, but now it seemed that everyone was faster than them. It was too strange. Could it be that their strength had increased so much after following Bewitching? Thinking back to their familiarity and worship of Bewitching, countless guesses flashed through everyone's minds, and a trace of envy quietly appeared. As dark attribute cultivators, even if their cultivation talent wasn't weak, it was unavoidable that they would roll their eyes at others. However, Huang Futing and the others' open and above-board attitude really made them envious. This was a feeling that they hadn't felt for a long time. In the past, they always felt like they were hiding in the dark. When they saw Huang Futing and the others, everyone was so calm, without any concealment at all. This feeling was as if they didn't feel that the dark attribute was shameful at all. That's right. That's it. This was what they had been looking forward to. There was no discrimination, no rolling eyes, and no ridicule. They gathered together to warm each other up, and even the Holy Maiden of Light had no prejudice against them. If they hadn't seen this scene with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that all of this was real. However, it was this scene that they couldn't help but yearn for from the bottom of their hearts. If they could also become a part of it, how great would that be? Looking at the godlike man again, a trace of longing appeared in everyone's hearts. Among the many dark attribute cultivators, Bewitching had always been unique and the most outstanding existence. If they followed him, they wouldn't have to bitterly endure in their current environment, and they could communicate openly with their companions. Even if they had to leave where they were, they wouldn't hesitate. After all, they had been on their own since the awakening of the darkness element. Bewitching noticed the gazes of these cultivators. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea, quietly flashed a glimmer of light, but he did not say anything. Instead, he pretended not to know and continued to copy the contents on the wall. Although he didn't recruit any more dark attribute cultivators, after this operation, the trust between them was even greater than before. As for the cultivators who wanted to join in the future, he would have to go through a strict selection process. Not just anyone could join. The people in front of him came from various forces, and their backgrounds were complicated. No one could tell whether they were sincere or not. If this news was leaked out before the Dark Sacred Assembly was established, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. He would not take the risk. Although the walls of the hall were very wide and the content on them was extremely rich, with so many cultivators copying together, the speed was very fast. As long as he continued like this, it wouldn't be long before he would be able to copy down all the contents. However, the good times did not last long. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.